Thank you all Carol Francis, and thank you all so much for having me on today. I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to share some of this information with you. So I have a slideshow. I'm going to be talking to you today about sort of the state of Black migrants in California and along the border of Mexico as well. And small agenda for what we'll be talking about, right? Who BAJI is and what we do. I'm sorry, real quick, I want to make sure I don't go over time, and I know we started a little bit later. How long do I have to speak?
I think you would have till about 9 or so, then time to take some questions and discussion, if you need it.
Oh, till 9?
If you need it, or it could, we could go to discussion sooner, but yeah.
Rose, you're muted. Rose, you're muted.
Yeah, I think Michael basically answered. I mean, what happens is sometimes if we leave it too late for the discussion, we get kind of involved in it, and then we're kind of running toward the end. We finish at 9:30, and we like to kind of tie up the discussions by about 9:22, 23. So, 9 is the absolute latest, maybe a little earlier if you feel, or we feel that we're going to want to talk a lot about it.
Okay. Well, I'll try to wrap this up in about 20 minutes, maybe 30 the most, and give a good amount of time for discussion.
That's even earlier than we usually have. Just go with it. Just go with the flow. We're good at talking.
All right. Love to hear it. Okay, y'all. Thanks so much for bearing with my questions. So yes, I'll talk a little bit about who BAJI is and the work that we do, talk about some issues affecting us at the national level, and then a bit more focused in here in Los Angeles, and then give you some calls to action, right? BAJI is the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, and we are the largest Black-led racial justice and immigrant rights organization in the country. We believe that a thriving multiracial democracy requires racial, social, and economic justice for all. We're fiercely abolitionist and believe in the abolishment of all carceral systems, including jails, prisons, and so-called detention centers, and the institutions that uphold them. BAJI was formed to bring Black voices together, right? To advocate for equality and justice in our laws and in our communities. Excuse me. So some of the work that we do, we sort of have these 3 buckets, these 3 C's of care and wellness, cops and cages, and civic engagement. And under care and wellness, you can see some of the work that we do is related to COVID relief, mutual aid, public education, right? And also legal assistance. And so mutual COVID work looks like language access info, distribution, PPE distribution, and participating in different vaccination drives and events. And then with mutual aid, we had a mutual aid program where we provided direct cash assistance and shared resources for mental health support, rental housing assistance, food distributions, hygiene assistance, and again, we offered legal aid through this program as well. And then public education, what we're doing here, where we offer public education for and on behalf of our community members, right? We've had various reports that we put out on our website as well, one of which I will be talking more to you about later. And I believe it was shared in sort of the outreach for this event. And I'll also be talking a little bit more about our Visions and Stories report, right? Our gender justice report that we put out a couple years ago, or last year, if I remember correctly. And so Cops and Cages refers to the intersection of the criminal sanction system and the immigration system, which we call that intersection crimmigration, right? And this refers to the criminalization, deportation, separation, of our people, right? And the work that we do is to find protections for all Black migrants and fight against the exclusion of Black migrants in discussions of, services and policy measures as well. And so when we talk about separation, that doesn't just mean ICE, it also means incarceration, right, in the carceral system as we know it, and through institutions like DCFS, which is actively separating children from parents, right? And then again, protection, we're advocating for temporary but also permanent protections for our community members. Temporary is cool, but permanent protections is what we fight for the hardest, right? And then last but certainly not least, civic engagement. The work that we do around civic engagement is not just elections, although it's an election year, so we've done a lot of work around elections this year so far and intend to do more in November, but also policy advocacy, right? Fighting to ensure, again, that our community members are being uplifted in whatever policy measures are being brought to the table, fighting to create policy measures, right, that support and uplift Black migrants and fight for their, humanity, really. And so these are sort of our 3 C's: care and wellness, cops and cages, and civic engagement. National issues, right? So the biggest national issue that immigrants face is crimmigration, is criminalization. It's important to note that the same racist policing that incarcerates Black people in America also affects Black people who are immigrants, right? Local police are some of the biggest feeders into the detention and deportation systems. And, excuse me, Black immigrants are more likely to be incarcerated by ICE because of racial profiling by local police, right? 76% of Black immigrants are deported because of over-policing and racial profiling in Black communities. And Black immigrants who have any encounter with local police may be at risk of deportation. And I'm going to throw a little bit of data at you. Bear with me and try and, let me know if there's anything that you need me to stop and explain a bit more. But more than 1 out of every 5 non-citizens facing deportation on criminal grounds before the Executive Office of Immigration Review is Black. And so in turn, 1 out of every 5 immigrants detained while facing deportation on criminal grounds before this office is Black. So that pretty much means if you are facing deportation and you are Black, then you are also going to be detained while facing deportation, right? Some others might have the chance to go to court and be, at wherever they reside, a family's house or their own home. But for Black people, you will be detained if you are going to be deported, if you're at risk of deportation, which means you are being incarcerated, right? And then the last fact I'll throw for now is over 3/4 of Black immigrants who were removed on criminal grounds compared to less than half of immigrants overall, right? Over 3/4 of Black immigrants were removed on criminal grounds. And this, for some Black immigrant populations, this number is even higher, right? For Black immigrants from Caribbean islands, it's 100%, right? For some Caribbean island nations, it's 100%. If you're from Jamaica, 100% of people being deported from Jamaica, people being deported who are from Jamaica are being deported on criminal grounds, right? Which just shows the immense amount of criminalization that Black immigrants are having to experience as opposed to other immigrant populations. So the next thing I want to talk to you a bit about is MPP 2.0. MPP stands for Migrant Protection Protocols. It's also known as the Remain in Mexico program. And essentially it gives the US government the authorization to remove undocumented migrants that arrive at the southern border and return them to Mexico for the duration of their immigration proceedings. While they're being forced to wait in Mexico, The number of backlogged cases in immigration court has nearly tripled from 629,051 back in 2017 to now 1,784,623. So that's from almost 630,000 to now 1.7, almost 1.8 million people as of April 2022, right? And of these pending cases that list a majority Black country as migrants' country of origin, 78% experienced higher average wait times than the overall average, right? That means Black people are people who are claiming that they're from a Black country of origin are experiencing almost 80% more higher average wait times than the overall average of waiting that other people are experiencing. That is racialized, right? That's not on accident, that is intentional. And it's important to also note that migrants are not entitled to representation in removal proceedings. And in 2021, 61% of Haitian immigrants in deportation proceedings did not have legal representation. This is something that we're often faced with in the work that we do too. We're often being faced with people who are, at the last round of their immigration proceedings and without an attorney to support them. And there isn't always the ability to have an attorney take them on as a client if they are that late in their proceedings, right? It's almost impossible for some. I heard someone go off mute. Did you have a question or something you wanted to share?
We usually do questions at the end, but if anybody has something they want to do so now and you want to take it, that would be fine.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. I heard some noise, so I thought someone was trying to alert me of something or ask something. But okay, I'll continue. And excuse me, my throat is acting up today. So this is this sort of the status of what Black immigrants are facing under this policy MPP 2.0, right? As you can see, this policy has been increasing the risk of violence against Black migrants in Central American countries, as we've seen, right? Because there's anti-Blackness is not something that exists in America alone. It exists throughout the world, right? It's a global issue, and it's something that Black migrants have reported experiencing in mass in Central American countries, right? They've experienced this in Mexico. They've experienced this in Brazil and in other countries that they've been spending time, that they've migrated to, tried to live a life of sustenance and survival, and have only been met with anti-Blackness, prejudice, with discrimination, and in many, many cases, violence as well. So to continue, I want to talk a little bit about Title 42. Title 42, again, is a 1944 public health statute that was reinforced during the Trump era, but has been continuously reinforced throughout the Biden era as well, right? And to be clear, this is an illegal policy in terms of international human rights law. This is entirely going against what human rights is meant to be. So it empowers federal health authorities to prohibit migrants from entering the country if they're able to determine that doing so could prevent contagious diseases. So of course, at the start of COVID, this was a perfect excuse to put in place to prevent people coming from other countries to entering the US, because under the guise of, oh, well, they could potentially spread COVID, as if the US cared about COVID to begin with, right? If it cared about COVID to begin with, there would be better policies that were going on to prevent the many lives that were lost in the US because of COVID, right? And abroad. And so this has contributed to migrants being stopped at the border, being turned back at the border, and when they make it to U.S. soil, right? Over 10,000 Black migrants from the Caribbean and Africa have been deported using Title 42. Additionally, access to asylum in the U.S. is being denied, which asylum is a human right. It's a natural human right, and according to international law as well, people are allowed to seek asylum. They have a right, a human right to seek asylum, especially when they're coming from countries such as Haiti, which are not in a state that will allow them to live, right? They have to flee Haiti because of tinkering from the US, right? The US's involvement in Haiti's current status needs to be acknowledged. And in addition to that, Haiti is not livable, right? They've had natural disasters, and they've had the collapse of their government, the loss of their president, and have had to flee as a result of this inability to have human life exist and sustain in the way that it should be able to at Haiti. And so because of Title 42, Haitians are being deported, right? We've had thousands upon thousands, tens upon thousands of Haitians being deported under Title 42. And while 51% of all migrant encounters resulted in expulsion in Title 42 in March of 2022, Haitian migrants have faced an average encounter to expulsion rate of 67%, right? That means as soon as they're encountering U.S. Border Patrol or any U.S. authoritative entity, they are likely to be exposed, likely to be deported under Title 42. And it's important to note that at this point, nearly 1 in 575 people who are living in Haiti today have been on a Biden administration expulsion or deportation plane within the past year. That's 1 in 575 people living in Haiti today. That's a lot of people. And a lot of those people are women and children. And so it's, again, a reminder that the US is being very intentional about their attack on Black migrants, particularly, because we saw how they were able to quickly scramble to accept Ukrainian migrants, but work diligently to exclude and deport Haitian migrants and other Black migrants as well. So this is important to note, because when we talk about genocide, right, the title of this presentation is "We Charge Genocide Again," right? And when we talk about genocide, we have to note that there's really two strong elements of genocide. One is that there's a special intent to destroy in whole or in part nationality, ethnicity, or race or religious group, right? We see that here. There's intentionality behind these policies, behind Title 42, behind MPP, behind metering, which I will talk about soon, that is actively seeking the outcome of Black people not entering this country, right? Of people of color not entering this country. And we see that through the allowance of non-Black people who are white, able to enter this country. And so the second element of genocide is the commission of any prohibited acts against members of such a group. Title 42 goes against international human rights law, refusing asylum and people back to where they're from, which is not a stable place to live, is against human rights law. The US has committed both of these acts, and so we say that they are committing genocide against Black migrants. So let me talk a little bit about humanitarian parole. Actually, let me see, if possible, I want to skip ahead to metering and then I'll get back to humanitarian parole. So
can I ask the person, excuse me, can I ask the person who's on the telephone to try and mute, please? We're getting a lot of interference from your telephone. It's the one that ends in 0874. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry,
Okay.
carry on.
No problem. Thank you. Excuse me. So, metering, if you're unfamiliar, is the US's queue management system that imposes a daily limit on the number of migrants who are processed by US immigration officials. And as you can imagine, metering is anti-Black because inherently it's done so on an individual basis, right? It targets Black asylum seekers and it blocks their entry into the US and blocks access to legal counsel, which in turn violates their rights to due process, right? And it's important to also note that there's a huge gap in terms of having, language access available for Black migrants, right? And that further violates their human rights, their basic human rights of being able to understand, the world that's around them. And so just wanted to briefly touch on this. I won't spend too much time because it is pretty straightforward. Black people are more likely than other immigrants to be sent to the back of the line. And as I shared earlier, their average waiting periods are much higher than other immigrants as well. Okay, so going back, humanitarian parole. So humanitarian parole, first of all, is granted by USCIS or the US Citizenship and Immigration Services. And it's sometimes also granted by US Customs and Border Protection, which is CBP, right? Parole is usually not granted for more than a year, but because of Title 42, it's one of the few ways that vulnerable asylum seekers can enter the US through the southern border, right? It's important to note again that DHS and CBP have denied most applications for humanitarian parole, right? And denials include people who should qualify, right? I want to give a trigger warning because some of what I'm going to share might be, it just might be triggering for folks in terms of talking about sexual abuse and trafficking. And then various health conditions, and I'll be brief, but there have been instances of a Honduran woman who was sexually assaulted by Mexican police and then sex trafficked. That's somebody who should qualify humanitarian parole, and that's somebody who is denied humanitarian parole. There is a Central American asylum seeker who was beaten severely by Mexican police. That is someone who should have been accepted for humanitarian parole but was denied humanitarian parole. There's a Haitian asylum seeker currently living with HIV. That is someone who should be accepted for humanitarian parole but was denied humanitarian parole. So when we say again that the US has a racialized immigration policy, this is what we're talking about, right? It's not favorable to Black people, it's not favorable to brown people, it's only favorable to people who fit their criteria of acceptable, right? Which we know to be white people. Moving forward, I want to talk about TPS, something you may have heard a lot about. TPS stands for Temporary Protective Status, and I'll be very brief here. It's something that is offered to people who are coming from countries that are experiencing difficulties that make it unsafe for them to be deported back to their countries, right? Again, this is something that Black migrants have fought hard to obtain, whereas Ukrainians received it within 3 days of their civil war happening back home. For context, Cameroonians had to wait 3 years to get TPS, and it was from years of community advocates and directly impacted people fighting hard to obtain this. The same TPS, right, the same status that was so easily granted to Ukrainian immigrants had to be fought hard for Cameroonians to receive. And it should also be noted that Haitians have previously received TPS. So for a country to for the US to grant TPS to a country such as Haiti, and then in the same breath begin to criminalize it and deport its community members, right? It's peoples who are trying to enter the US and deport it through Title 42, just shows the rampant anti-Blackness that persists within US immigration policy. And again, although we support any method of allowing migrant protections, we know as BAJI that TPS is not a permanent solution. And so we continue to fight for permanent protections for all Black migrants. Okay. So I'm going to move forward now. And I want to talk a little bit about this, about the abuse and mistreatment of Black migrants in detention. BAJI and the American Immigration Court filed a suit in order to secure FOIA requests. And FOIA, for those who don't know, is a Freedom of Information Act. It allows you to obtain information from the government, right? And it's information that should be free to the public, but you have to file this sort of request in order to receive it, right? Because the government just holds on to things in order to maintain sort of the system of power they have. But so BAJI and AIC filed a suit to secure a FOIA request with regard to this extensive mistreatment that Black migrants have been facing throughout 8 immigrant detention facilities in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And what we heard, right, the experiences we learned of from these FOIAs and from the migrants who are imprisoned in these detention centers are truly disturbing. We've heard of people receiving degrading treatment, right? Having to deal with racism, racial slurs, physical attacks by guards, medical neglect, and often medical abuse as well, physical coercion to sign signatures that allow them, or that sort of consent to deportation when nobody is ever consenting to deportation, right? They're being forced to it. And one specific instance at the One Correctional Center, a Cameroonian asylum seeker reported being assaulted, choked, and beaten while guards physically manipulated their hands into providing their fingerprints in order to consent to deportation. These are the fights that happen on US soil, right? These are the fights that prove that genocide is continuing to happen on US soil. There's an active attack on Black migrants here. There's an active target that's on our backs. And this just gives you this sort of small window into the large amount of mistreatment and abuse that Black immigrants have been facing in detention. Okay, now I'm going to talk a bit about some regional issues, right? Specifically issues that have been affecting Black migrants in metropolis cities. I have to start again with criminalization because we are more criminalized than any other immigrant communities because Black people are more criminalized than any other immigrant community, right? It's also important to know that Black immigrants live with Black people because we are Black people, right? And Black and brown communities are more heavily policed than other communities. That's just a fact, right? We know that to be true because of the history of policing. And it's also important to note that Los Angeles specifically is a border town, and it resides within 100 miles of a US border, which makes it a border town. In fact, a large amount of cities in the US are considered border towns because they are within 100 miles of a US border. I think I saw something recently that said over 26 million people in the US are living in border towns. Maybe that number is higher, I don't remember, but that just shows the impact of the ability for ICE to be, police agencies in these cities, right? And ICE is very much so present in Los Angeles. It's widely known that our communities are underserved, right? And this extends into the need for universal representation, right? And this is specifically in immigration courts, but also in criminal courts as well, right? In the criminal sanction system as well. There's also a dire need for access to city and county resources, right? That includes language access. It includes assimilation and opportunities to live and thrive, right? It includes COVID relief, health and wellness, rental and housing assistance, and general equal opportunity, right? Equal opportunity for employment, for education, again, health access, mental health access. These are all things that, again, in our communities do not come easy, right? Accessing these resources do not come easy for Black migrants. Moving now to gender injustice stories. I'm going to talk a little bit now about this gender injustice report that we had called Stories and Visions. And in it, a number of Black women and femme migrants were interviewed through qualitative research and were able to share their lived experiences on what it means to be a Black woman migrant or a Black femme migrant. And so some of what they shared is they have to deal with, some of the stories that they shared is the immense amount of responsibilities, support, and needs that they have, right? Women and femmes have the brunt of responsibilities when it comes to caretaking, and that multiplied during the pandemic. Right? Many stated that they are the caregivers and the glue for their family members, which includes their younger siblings, parents, and grandparents. And several women also shared that they feel there is a lack of room that they're given to make mistakes or be human, and that results in exhaustion, depression, and other adverse health outcomes. And they also feel compelled to prove that their family sacrifices are fruitful, not only for their personal sake, but also for their family back home, right, who they're expected to support and open doors for to also come to the US. Another important lived experience that they shared is confronting discrimination in professional spaces, right? From the lived experiences of many of the participants, we not only learned that they experienced race and gender-based discrimination in school and the workplace, but also that the bodies of Black women and femmes are heavily policed in professional settings, right? Whether that's their hair, their clothing, their hijab, their manner of walking and talking. It's heavily policed in both school and the workplace. Again, we see that word, criminalization, right? I can't stress how important of an impact this has had on Black people as a whole, right? People in the study specifically felt that it was deeply problematic that billions of dollars are poured into the destruction of Black immigrant lives instead of into underfunded sectors like the arts and education. And so again, this lends itself to the discussion of defunding the police, right? Defunding, taking those resources away from them because they truly do have billions of dollars, and instead pouring them into areas where people in general and Black people specifically can live and thrive, right? Having more money for underfunded sectors of the world, like the arts, like the education system, like mental health resources, like counseling, like physical health, like so many other things, right? Like intervention spaces. We need to welcoming services, right, for immigrants who come into this into this country. There's so many areas that need to be funded, right? And Black immigrants in the study also voiced their concerns about the erasure of Black immigrants in conversation on immigration. Again, when it comes to talking about policing, in terms of the immigrant justice movement, Black people have had to carry that weight on them in terms of talking about it and calling it out as an actively harmful institution, as an institution that is derived from slave catching, as an institution that is anti-Black to its core. And having to be the only people who are talking about that in the immigration system and space is taxing, right? Even for Black immigrants who are just living their lives, who maybe aren't doing social justice work, right? We've seen that through the stories that they shared. Due to time and just capacity, I won't share about the sexual assault and harassment or the religious and spiritual practices. You can definitely read more about that at this gender justice report on our website. But I'll talk very briefly about experiences with healthcare practitioners, specifically as it relates to COVID.
Actually, setting up a group that we're interfaith community. I think we'd kind of appreciate hearing a little bit about the religious and spiritual practices, because that is a basis of our group. If you could just give us an overview, that would be wonderful.
Sure, I'll be very brief because I didn't prepare too many notes on this from previous presentations, but it should be important to note that Black Muslim women have experienced a very intense amount of discrimination, not only for their religion, or not only for their race and their being a woman, but also for their religion, right? Not having the ability to pray when they need to pray, not having the ability to wear their hijab out in public or in professional spaces without it becoming an issue for other people, has been a prevalent issue that a lot of the people who were a part of this study shared, right? Having discrimination based on racist ideals of so-called terrorism is something that a lot of Black Muslim women have had to deal with as well while navigating their existence in the US. And just overall having to deal with Islamophobia in the US has been a huge challenge for them, but that compounded with their intersectional identities of being a woman and being, having any other intersectional identity, right? Whether they're queer, whether they're femme, whether they're, disabled, whether they have mental health issues. These are all things that have affected their well-being in the US. And so again, there's much more on this on the report that you can read on the website. So very briefly to talk about healthcare practices, the pandemic showed the intersectional inequalities that exist in the US, right? Black people were more likely to be essential workers and to be at risk. And as Black people, we are more likely to contract the virus. And for some, treatment has led to more health problems and fatalities, right? And I think it's important to note that a lot of Black immigrant community members work in these sort of essential jobs, whether that's service jobs, whether that's, maintenance jobs, whether that's under the table gigs, whether that's, being your driver in your Uber, or whether it's being in the healthcare field as your nurse, as your, elderly caregivers, a lot of Black immigrants, or as your child care as well, right? A lot of Black immigrants have had to work these sorts of jobs and in turn been more likely to be at risk for exposure to COVID and to, be ending up passing away from COVID as well. So one of the last things I want to talk about here is gender justice visions. The people who were a part of this study ended up being asked the question, if you had, $1 million or $1 billion to, build a world of your own, to reimagine a world of your own, what would it include? And these are some of the things that they talked about, right? They talked about self-care, physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual self-care, social, relational, safety and security, right? This is what they talk about when they say self-care. And also just not actively doing something and controlling what we passively consume. And further than that, right, self-care is extended to community care as well. Self-care is important, but community care is essential, is what we got from the women and femmes who took this study. Black immigrant women and femmes are not superhumans. It's a stereotype that's violently placed on us, right? They need more spaces to come together, to exist in, and to feel safer than they do otherwise in this world. And this has become even harder to manifest given the condition of this pandemic. So many respondents shared that they get strength and recharge from being around community and people like them. And that isn't happening in the same way it does pre-COVID as it does under COVID, right? And it's taken a toll on people. So finally, Blueprint for Liberation. This report is framed in terms of stories and visions, but solutions to pressing issues are also being named. So again, how would you use $1 million to better the mental health of Black immigrant women and femmes? It's being named, right? This answer is being named by Black immigrant women and femmes. And so they have named that they want to provide healthcare and housing. They want to open a free mental health center staffed by Black immigrant therapists. They want to support the sustainability of Black-led and Black-centered grassroots organizations that are already doing the work. And they also mentioned developing a hotline that Black immigrants can access for support. It's truly, truly important to listen to these stories, to listen to these visions for our future, right? Blueprints for liberation, because it's not for people in positions of power to decide what those solutions are. The people that are most impacted are saying, hey, this is what we need. So we have to be able to amplify those voices and needs in more direct and meaningful ways for that to translate into those resources and sorts of support that folks need. I'm going to close out with some of these call to action, right? The first of which being end Title 42, right? Do what you have to do. Call the Biden administration, call your senators. You don't have to wait for a toolkit. You can find their information. It's not hard to find. It's a Google search away. Call them and urge them to end Title 42, right? Urge them to put an end to this racist practice and policy and stop criminalizing migration, right? Stop criminalizing people who are trying to come to this country to live. That's all they're trying to do, is to live, and to criminalize people who are using their natural human right to asylum is inhumane and against international law. So also in extension, calling on the Biden administration to respect the right to asylum, right? And demand permanent protections. Demand permanent protections for all Black migrants who are coming to the US, right, in search of a better life. Demand permanent protections for them. And finally, racial equity for Black migrants, right? Again, this looks like equal opportunity in employment and education, in language access, and access to all city and county services, and by extension, access to all government services, right? So these are things that you can do in your positions of power, right, with your American citizenship, that you can do to protect Black migrants and to uplift and support Black migrants. So that is all. Thank you for listening. Happy to talk a bit more, but also wanting to share that you can download our full report, The State of Black Immigrants, on our website, right? I don't believe our website is on here, but it's www.baji.org. You can also find State of Black Immigrants in California specifically. You can read There's a Target on Us, which talks about the lived experiences of Black immigrants in Mexico as well. And you can keep your eyes peeled for the 20th of June, which is this Monday, where we will be launching our newest report that is an update on the There is a Target on Us report. We'll share some new statistics and data that is a bit more up to date on that as well. I am going to stop sharing now.
Oh, thank you so much. You've got my mind absolutely reeling, I can tell you, with your statistics. One thing before we actually go on to questions, what we'll do, we'll ask people to put in the chat if they have a question. Could you just give us a little idea for yourself, what brought you into this work, and a little bit about your background, just so we can have a more idea of you?
Yes, absolutely. So I should have introduced myself properly to begin with. My name is Maraky. I use she, they pronouns. And what brought me into this work is many things, but mainly my intersecting identities, right? I am Black, I am a migrant, or the children of migrants, although we use the term migrants to include generational immigrants as well. And I am queer myself. And I've seen firsthand and secondhand the experiences of the sort of results of these harmful policies, right? And I've seen the results of a lack of care for Black people as a whole and Black migrants specifically in the US. I grew up to two revolutionaries, if you will, and so growing up in community organizing has always given me the spirit to fight for my people and fight for my community. And that compounded with the experiences I've witnessed and experienced trying to navigate being, in these intersectional identities in the US has really led me to join BAJI and continue this fight that has been going on for much longer than I've lived on this earth. So yeah, in short, that is why I'm here doing what I do.
Rose, I don't know if it's intentional, but your camera is showing us your lovely floor.
I know, and it's bizarre. It just suddenly turned around and did that. I just looked at it, and I don't know how it happened. I mean, I've just been trying to play with it. So you might have to listen to my voice and look at my floor.
All right, as long as you know.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to work out what happened. It just suddenly happened out of nowhere. Anyway, we do have some hands up. I'm sorry, that was really rude of me to talk about my floor. Thank you so much for everything you've been telling us. And as I said, you've blown my mind with some of your statistics, so I'll probably get myself in the line to ask questions. At the moment, we have, oh gosh, 4 hands up. I tell you, we're a chatty lot. I will start, actually, I think the first hand I saw go up was Carol Francis, so I'll start with you, Carol Francis.
Okay, thank you. I tremendously respect your work. I'm really bothered by all of it, especially the racism against Black in Central America, although it's not surprising to me because I've been in Central America and I have seen the anti-dark. I mentioned earlier that one thing that really impressed me when I first heard of BAJI was your work in educating Latin American immigrant communities to work in unity. So could you speak on that? How has BAJI been working with Latin American immigrant communities to educate them to work with you?
Thank you for that question, Carol Francis. BAJI has done some work with Black immigrant communities in Mexico for sure, and we've gone to the border, we've gone to Tapachula, we've been in Tijuana, and we've talked with a lot of the Black migrant communities that are there and just tried to understand the journey that they've had, understand the lived experiences they had when they traveled through South America, Yes, through South America, through Central America, and found their way to the US border, right? Whichever border it is, whether it's Texas, California, wherever, right? And we've, just listened. Really, what we try to do is actively listen to what all that they've experienced and what all they've had to endure and what they continue to endure being Black and in Latin America, right? And a lot of it, as I shared before, is prejudice, discrimination, and rampant anti-Blackness. It's important to note, communities that are not migrants, right, but are products of the slave trade that have lived in those countries for many, many years and still face rampant anti-Blackness, still face prejudice and discrimination and violence. And so the only difference is these people are coming here now and are coming because of instability in their home nations, but nonetheless are having to deal with the same sort of anti-Blackness that others have had to face. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Jasmine?
Hi, thank you so much for your wealth of information and your statistics. I was so happy to hear Jamaica be raised, because I know that a lot of people don't know about Jamaicans and the work that they do, and how the information is.
Jasmine, can you raise your volume?
No, I don't think so.
I can hear her fine.
Okay, I just wanted to know more about Jamaica and how BAJI has done work with Jamaica, and how Jamaica is raised in immigration policies and work policies, because it's underrepresented and under talked about, I think, and it needs to be raised. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you for that question, Jasmine. Jamaica has such a beautiful history, but also painful one, right? Which we know has been a victim of sorts of white supremacy in its own way. And so Jamaicans are one of the, I believe, highest populations of immigrant communities here in the US, and are criminalized more so than other communities as well. And yeah, as you said, they come to this country, are often finding different forms of work like any other Black immigrant community does, and are criminalized more so than others. And I would be remiss not to mention the history and negative connotations and stereotypes that Jamaicans have had forced upon them, right? With the, people's understand or misconception of them being, potheads or Rastafarians or what have you, right? All of these stereotypes have been forced on them. Not that either existences are negative in it of itself, but to have a stereotype forced upon an entire nation of people has led to more criminalization for Jamaican populations out here in the US, right? I'm sorry, am I forgetting a portion of your question? It is early. Make sure I didn't miss something.
You answered a lot of my question, and I just think that we need to raise up Jamaican awareness more and make it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. No, thank you, Jasmine. I appreciate that, and I completely agree with you. We need to raise awareness, because for them to have 100% of their deportations being based on criminal grounds is indicative of the fact that we need to be uplifting our Jamaican siblings more. Thank you. Pardon me, I'm gonna go off camera very quickly, but I'm still here and I can talk. I just need to grab my charger. I left it in the other room.
Okay, so we'll just give you a second. While you're doing that, I just wanted to mention a couple of other people that came in. Lawrence Reyes and Fidel. I can't see Fidel now. I saw him a minute ago. Fidel, would you like to quickly just introduce yourself, because we haven't seen you for so long? It would be nice. Do unmute though first, BAJI.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I couldn't introduce myself earlier, but I connected to the group by my phone. 0874, it was my phone.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
And I was coming to Maggie's house because I'm working for her today. But anyway, it's a pleasure to see everyone up there, and keep going.
Thank you very much, Fidel. It's great to see you as well. Lawrence, do you want to very quickly introduce yourself since we're right in the middle of it, and then we'll come back to our questions? You're muted too.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I called most of the presentation. I was having a difficult time logging in because I'm at work, but my name is Lawrence Reyes. I'm with the Puerto Rican Alliance here in Los Angeles, and a very great presentation, my sister. And I have questions, so I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, your hand is up. Thank you. Michael, your question next.
Yeah. Thanks. I really appreciate the presentation. Some of us were at the People's Summit for Democracy, where Nana Jamfi spoke on behalf of BAJI, and very, very powerfully. And one of the things that came across there, in terms of the context of the whole People's Summit, was the effects of the U.S. role in Latin America and Africa as well, in really driving people out of their homelands. And I wonder if you could say a little more about that. I think also, the other thing that took place there, and then subsequently, was there was a delegation of women from Venezuela who spoke very movingly about in Venezuela they're trying to really overcome anti-Blackness in their history, and in particular recognize the contributions to Venezuelan culture and identity of people of African descent. And I think that's an important struggle going on in Latin America now, in a number of countries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that question. It's always important to highlight and call out U.S. imperialism. It's always a pleasure to do so too. And I think that it's important to note, as you mentioned, U.S. imperialism has affected Latin America. It's affected African countries. It's affected Caribbean countries as well, right? When you look at Haiti again, we can't forget the U.S. invasion and occupation from 1915 to 34. We can't forget the immense amount of political power that the U.S. has imposed on Haiti since then as well. And we have to keep in mind that the U.S. is white supremacist. The U.S. has its roots in white supremacy and in colonization. And so, yeah. I don't know much more else to say other than that is what the U.S. does. That's what Western countries do. That's what these countries in power do, is they impose upon other nations that are living their beautiful Black selves, living their beautiful brown selves, and having to deal and are then met with, U.S. colonial entities, U.S. colonial forces that want to sanction, want to impose policies on them that are truly meant to maintain the U.S.'s hold over other countries, maintain the U.S.'s power over other nations. It's not about anything else other than white supremacy and power. So. Yeah, just keeping that in mind. But thank you, Michael. I appreciate your question.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm so grateful for your presentation today, and I can tell that our group is, and how clear your message is. I'm interested in the scope of the organization's work. You've talked about Central America, Mexican immigrants, Black and brown. Do you equate brown or Black, your Black alliance? Is there a broad definition to that? Does it equate to people of color? What's the scope of your focus?
Thank you for that question. When we say Black Alliance for Just Immigration, we do mean that we are centering Black people in every sense of the word centering. We focus on policies and services. All of our efforts are focused towards Black people first, because we understand that when the most marginalized of the least privileged are free and are offered the same services and opportunities as everyone else, then other people can be free and receive the benefits of those services and policies as well, right? So we focus on Black people with the knowledge that when Black people are helped, everyone else will also receive those benefits. So I hope that makes sense in terms of what our scope is. We have alliances with people of color who are non-Black, but our scope and our work is predominantly and solely focused for Black people. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Lawrence?
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Maraky. So I come from one of the Caribbean nations, Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico has been used as a block towards our Haiti siblings that seek refuge on the island. And I'm glad that you talked about the slave trade, right? Because the transcontinental genocide that began this whole issue of white supremacy and the continued colonization of the nations. And let me just tell you, Puerto Rico, there is racism that exists against Black people, although there's a rich fortification of our African ancestors that came from Western Africa, from Equatoria, and we have Congolese culture in us. And that was the protection that provided the indigenous Aragua, who were also throughout the Caribbean and the Taino. But the only nation that I've been to, well, two nations that I've been to, that Latin nations that I've been to, Africa's on my bucket list, but the two African nations that I've been to, I mean, the two Latin nations that I've been to that talk openly about the contradictions of racism has been Venezuela and Cuba. Cuba has a regular show, used to have a regular show on national television called La Batalla de Ideas, right? Which they would talk about openly the contradictions on TV. And I know Puerto Rico has the same history of pelo malo, which is bad hair, good hair, you know, your complexion, your lightness, how your facial features are projected. So can you touch on that? I don't know. You know, I belong to the Puerto Rican Alliance out here, and we do ally ourselves with other accomplices. I don't know about allies. I'm looking for accomplices, people that are actually going to engage in actions to smash this supremacist system that we currently live in. Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. It was excellent.
Thank you, Lawrence. I want to make sure I understood your question correctly. You want to repeat it just one more time? Alliance or accomplices in other nations, is it?
No, being able for other nations and the ones that I saw that openly talked about the contradictions of racism and of color and erasure and the transcontinental genocide that began with the slave trade that you mentioned has been Cuba and Venezuela. I haven't been to Nicaragua, but I understand that they also have a race problem. So I think the only way to really deconstruct this whole white supremacist system and the colonization that is the breeding epidemic of white supremacy is being able to listen to BAJI and listen to other accomplices and engage in that kind of work. So I appreciate it. I don't know if there's a question, but I think there is. How do you look at Puerto Rico being like the Berlin Wall, if you will, of blocking our Haitian siblings from coming in. And that is as a result of the system of colonization that began with Spain and continues with the United States.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Lawrence. We have to look at Venezuela and Colombia as our allies, right? As our Cuba, right? As our accomplices, as you said. Seeing the way revolutions were able to take place in those countries, seeing the way that we were able to watch them organize and defeat, right, the colonial entities that had, were pressing their thumb on their peoples, is amazing. It's a blue book, a playbook that we have to follow, that we have to strategize on top of, right, and by extension that we have to, reimagine and do again here in this country. Repeat, that's the word, reimagine and repeat in this country. And so thank you for highlighting that, and thank you for highlighting again that there's a blockage between Haiti and Puerto Rico, that there is, again, anti-Blackness that's preventing Black people from being able to live and thrive in this world. It's not just in the US, right? It's throughout the world. But we cannot ignore that the US has a particular way of being able to import and export its anti-Blackness, right? It's exporting it through policies like Title 42. It's exporting it through, deporting Black people and then allowing other countries and imposing other countries to accept those people, and by as a result, perpetuating this anti-Blackness, right?
Thank you. We have 3 hands have just shot up. Always the way. Just want to finish up.
Okay.
But Melvin, you put something in the chat and you put your hand up. Could you just talk a little bit about what you put in the chat and why you put your hand up or not?
Yes, and once again, let me apologize for not having the camera, but I'm on an old computer without a camera. Just a 2-part question. What is the relationship between Black immigrants and foundational Black Americans? And then your topic, we charge genocide again. I'm wondering, is there a petition going to the UN similar to the one that William Patterson took in 1951?
Beautiful questions. Thank you so much, Melvin. To answer the first part, the relationship between Black immigrants and foundational Black Americans is that we are one, right? We are siblings, we are one. There is there's obvious distinctions between us, but at the end of the day, our similarities are far outweighing the differences that white supremacy would want us to, conflate. And for the sake of time, I'll try to be quick, but it's important that we try to focus more on the similarities, that we do unite ourselves and acknowledge that we've already been united, right? Many of the civil rights leaders that we know and love and highlight were also Black immigrants or had parents who were Black immigrants. When we look at Malcolm X, his mother was from Grenada. When we look at Kwame Ture, right, his history. When we look at Shirley Chisholm and her Caribbean background as well, right? Many of our Black civil rights leaders that are foundational to Black Americans living in the US now, and to the way that we're able to exist in the US today, were also Black immigrants. So we've always been one. We've always been one. We've just been seeded these sort of seeds of division. And to answer your second question, we do not have a petition going to the UN right now, but maybe we should. Maybe we should. Thank you for bringing up William Patterson's petition of 1951. That was incredibly powerful and impactful, and seemingly fell on deaf ears, but we need to, it seems like that's the work that we're constantly doing, right? And that it's falling on deaf ears, but that's why we continue to fight. Maybe a petition is no longer enough, right? Maybe we continue to fight in the ways that we fight for abolition. But thank you for your question, Melvin. I hope I answered it to some degree.
Thank you. Now, Anthony and Doc Ruby, I mean, if we can just put these two together and really short questions, because we're nearly at 20 minutes past 9. So anyway, if you could just each ask your question and then we'll see where we go from there. Thank you. Anthony, you go first.
Maraky, thank you, for bringing this to us together. And there's so many different people here. We have like the broadcasting systems and the religions and everything. What would be the next step that we could work together and take to the UN, or are there groups already that are ready for us to come in, or what would you say would be the next step? Because this is so important. And in my work this morning, I unified with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruby. I appreciate that.
It's all right. Go on.
Oh, okay. All right. So thank you very much. Right now, there's sort of maybe 2 or 3 things that immediately come to mind. I'll try to be quick for the sake of time. One, organize. Do what you have to do to organize your people and uplift these issues that are, too, being led by Black immigrant leaders, right? Follow the lead of Black immigrants who have been doing this work, who have been doing this fight, and who are at the center of this fight. They're directly impacted Black people, right? Always follow their lead. And then 3, it kind of goes back to 1, organize and call your senators, right? You have the power to be able to call your senators whenever you want, blow up their line. If you want to make it a weekly thing that you do during your calls, where you take up 5 minutes of just calling your senator and saying, we need to put Title 42 to an end. We need to end Title 42. That's something that you can do, right? If you want to start doing emailing hours where you mass email the president and Mayorkas and whoever else you want to email to let them know you need to grant asylum to the many Black asylum seekers who are stuck at the border. That's something that you can do, right? But always follow the lead of Black immigrant organizations. Oh, the last thing I was going to say, donate your time and your money to Black immigrant organizations. Those are things that we're always in need of. So if you're able to do those sort of 3 or 4 things, that would make a huge difference in terms of furthering this fight.
Thank you. Anthony, I'm sorry, you're really on short time here.
Okay, so mine is just related. Do you have talking points? And also, does the president have the authority to repeal Title 42, or does it have to go through Congress? We need to, that would have an impact on who we would contact. So who do we contact, and where are the talking points to help us in that effort?
Yeah, so talking points.
By the way, thank you for your presentation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. These are good questions. The president tried to repeal Title 42, and then Congress, specifically moderate Democrats and Republicans, put a halt to it. A Louisiana judge recently put a stop to when it was going to be put to an end on May 23rd. And so he does have the ability to put a stop to it whenever he so pleases. For whatever reason, he chose an arbitrary date like May 23rd, who knows? But maybe to give folks time to repeal it. But there's always the people you can contact are President Biden, because him and Kamala are very much so in power and can put an end to this, and your local senators, right? Your local senators are people who you can put pressure on, because it is up to Congress to decide whether or not Title 42 continues to exist or not. And in terms of talking points, we've previously had toolkits that we've shared during several week of actions that we've had. So you can stay plugged into our listserv, and we can send those out to you when we have our weeks of action, or you can just go on our social media. Our talking points never stray too far from what we have on our social media. So you can just, stay tuned to what we're posting, and the language will come from there. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. This has been a really, really good session, and I think we've all learned a lot and been given some action here. Thank you. Just so that you know, the next thing that, yes, people are all clapping, but they're all muted, so you can accept all this applause. And we've even got a thumbs up on some people's screens as well, so you're getting a lot of applause here. The next thing that we do is we, if there are any notices about other organizations that we're affiliated to, people give those kind of fairly briefly. And then we lift up people who we all want to think about, which will just take a few minutes. And then we have a closing, and I apologize, I didn't actually ask anybody to close us. But you know, Ruby, you did such a wonderful reflection. Would you be interested in closing us as well?
Yes, I can close.
Thank you so much. Affiliated organizations, anybody have anything they need to say?
I have something to say, but I don't know if I'm affiliated or not.
Well, say it. If it's to do with an organization, yes.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to uplift our elder, Leonard Peltier, who is in the middle of a campaign for clemency. So I would encourage you to, because making it, liberating him would make a statement against this imperialist system, right? And I also want to ask Melvin to announce his show that is on WBAI in New York. And I just want to uplift our elders and have good thoughts for our elders and all those children that are living in very strange times. Thank you.
Okay. Well, since we've gone into the uplifting session, anybody else who wishes to mention anybody you're thinking of, anything happening?
My husband's birthday today, Damon Morse. He's 46.
Congratulations to him.
I'm sorry, didn't hear you. It was congratulations to who?
My husband. His birthday today. My
Ah.
husband.
Ah.
Nothing else? This is very unlike this group. Well, I would like to mention my friend Jan, who has had chemo treatment and they had to stop it early because of the side effects. And now she's got to have oral chemo instead of straight into the bones, and it does not sound fun. So I'd love people to think about her a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Ruby.
Well,
you finish us. Lovely.
So much has been said, so much, that let's just take a moment of power, peace within, to know that we're going to take this with us on our peaceful journey, even though we're each in a different and going a different path. It's still the same path, God's path for good. So let's just take a moment. You want to close your eyes or keep them open or close your hands or open them, whatever way. It's the power of peace within. And that peace is a journey. I call it peace power, no matter what. There is also, and always has been, people on a journey which wasn't really for the highest good. But we know that we can see that everything is overtaking the good. When I say everything's overtaking the good, anything that isn't good is stopping to go forward and saying, hey, I want to make a change for the well-being and the highest good of all people. We know as Jan is being supported in her healing and well-being, we know anyone else who hasn't been mentioned is truly accepting the blessings of their healings mentally, physically, financially, at every level. And I'm grateful for this organization and all the other organizations like this coming together in the unity of the oneness. And I released it in Thanksgiving prayer power, peace power, love power, joy power, harmony power. And so it is. Ashe. Amen. Hallelujah.
Amen. Thank you so much, Ruby.
Ache.
Thank you so much, Maraky and Rose, for leading our program today. Our board of directors will meet in 5 minutes at 9:35. The board will take a brief break. To everyone else, we wish you a safe and productive week ahead, and we hope you'll join us next week.